Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. For 2 years, Jensen has been the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri. That makes him the St. Louis area's top federal law enforcement officer. His office handles everything from racketeering cases to civil forfeiture. And under Jensen, it has made violent crime in St. Louis a particular focus. And he's here today to talk to us about it. Jeff Jensen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Sarah.
So, Jeff, your office had a big week last week. Tell us about Operation Triple Beam.
Triple Beam was an operation led by the U.S. Marshals Service. They targeted people with outstanding felony warrants that were gang members or violent criminals. So it was a tremendous effort to first locate all of these people, and then took quite a bit of bravery to arrest them all. There were 4 shootings involved, but in the end, 162 felons were arrested. Again, it was led by the Marshal Service, but it was also a cooperation among many law enforcement agencies, the Highway Patrol, the city, the county, North County Police Cooperative, DEA, St. Charles, St. Anne, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, just a large group of people focused on getting the worst of the worst off the streets.
And when you say 4 shootings involved, meaning 4 people came out shooting.
4 people
they didn't want to go.
Shot at law enforcement. Nobody was hurt. They're very professional and very well trained, so nobody was hurt. But it's dangerous work, and I really appreciate what they did.
And these sound like exactly the kind of people we want to see being taken off the streets.
Absolutely. There were members of a number of gangs, the Wellston Boys, the 27 Accomack Gangster Crips, the College and Carter Crips, 41 Delmar Mob, and the Murda Gang. So it was a successful operation, and we'll keep doing it.
So one of the guys that you reportedly picked up was Malik Ross. He's suspected in the killing of 7-year-old Xavier Usenga, who was shot while playing in his yard in North St. Louis a few months ago. And Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner has declined so far to charge him in that case. You guys picked him up. What's his status right now?
Right now he's charged, so I can't say much about the case other than what's public, but he's charged federally, as well as his aunt, who has been charged for theft of funds, essentially bank money. That's what he's charged with, and I can't really say much more than that.
Okay, so he has not yet faced charges in the Xavier Usenga shooting.
That's
but
correct.
He's being held.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, one side note, I saw you guys got a lot of bad guys, and I got to admit, I was kind of surprised to see only $24,000 in cash was seized. Are even the criminals going cash-free these days?
I don't know why there wasn't more money seized.
Well,
there were 40...
looking around the country, it felt like everybody had similarly low numbers on the cash front. A lot of assets. You guys are getting cars left and right, but cash just isn't the game, maybe?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I hadn't thought of it until you asked the question, but there were 40 guns seized, crime guns, and then about 10 pounds of drugs of various sorts.
Okay, so certainly some assets that you guys are happy to have.
Correct.
Now, you were a federal prosecutor for many years, but the office as you're leading it, you've got a different focus than the one that you worked in, and the focus is violent crime. I understand that goes back to Jeff Sessions. Has that changed at all with Attorney General Barr being in charge?
It's changed a little bit. Recently, last week, the Attorney General announced what was called Project Guardian. It doesn't change a whole lot of what we do here in St. Louis. It's a request or command to all of the U.S. attorneys to focus on violent crimes, coordinate with local officials, local prosecutors. We've been doing that. Focus on crime guns, which is using the forensics from shooting scenes and comparing them shooting scene to shooting scene, and then going over after those active shooters. So we've been doing all that. What I think we'll do more of probably is focus on guns that are sold outside of legal channels. They're typically called lie and buy or lie and try cases, where people who are prohibited from having a firearm try to purchase a firearm. So we'll start going after those pretty aggressively.
So would these be something where you guys would be out there having undercover people trying to sell guns and seeing who picks up on it?
Well, trying to buy guns.
Trying to buy guns,
right.
yes.
Yeah. So, yes, undercovers are people working with law enforcement as informants.
It's an interesting focus coming from Attorney General Barr, since the Trump administration has been, they believe in the right to bear arms, but this is a particular circumstance where it sounds like they really want to focus on the wrong kind of guns being off the streets.
And I don't think anybody supports the right of convicted felons to have firearms, so that's what we're going after. And We can only prosecute when there are federal offenses involved. So that felon in possession is a big one. We do quite a few of those. Then also carjackings and what are called Hobbs Act robberies, but the robbery of a business because of its interstate nexus allows us to have federal jurisdiction.
I've been interested to see how many Hobbs Act cases seem to be coming out of your office. And it seems like historically these are things that we might count on the circuit attorney handling. And instead, we're seeing federal prosecutors take on these cases. What's the reasoning in that?
We have in the federal system. We have more resources. We have better resources, so we have a low recidivism rate. It's nothing I do, but the probation office here in the Eastern District of Missouri is the best in the country. They have about a 7.5% recidivism rate compared to national averages of 70 or 80%.
That seems remarkable.
It is remarkable, and they do it by getting people quality jobs. I mean, first, there are often life issues. It's a holistic approach that need to be addressed, and then we have reentry courts for certain types of criminals and make sure they have a job that they can be proud of. And that's what really makes a difference. So they have about 4.5% unemployment, again, about 7.5% recidivism.
And you say that their percentage is so much lower, recidivism-wise, than even other federal agencies in the country. Are they doing different things here than other federal probation offices?
I think they're doing more of the same things. I guess is the best way to summarize it. But they handle they have reentry courts. For gang members. They have one for people who have drug addictions, one for people with mental health problems, another with veterans. And they just closely supervise people, but make sure that they have a job that they can be proud of. They start with asking people what they would like to do, and then they pursue that kind of a career for that person. And they treat people with respect as they come out of prison, and I think that's what makes the difference.
So that seems like the good side of handling more people through the federal system. It seems like the flip side to that is historically, being in the federal system, you're probably looking at more prison time than somebody coming out of state court. Are you worried that that maybe some of these people are ending up seeing more time than they should just because it ends up being a federal offense as opposed to something on the state level?
I'm not worried about people getting more time than they should. I don't think that's not my concern. I don't think that's what happens. We have a very successful. First of all, we have just tremendous prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have about 70 really experienced, talented, dedicated prosecutors, and they treat each case with care and try to get to the right answer. So I don't think we have to worry about people getting too much time. Sometimes we wish people would get more time than they did, but typically the judges and the prosecutors and the defense bar, they get it right. So.
How much of a sea change has it been, this focus on violent crime versus, say, white-collar type offenders? Is there a significant percentage of your office's work that has slid from one category to the other?
Well, we do everything. I mean, we have a large portfolio of cases. I mean, we do white-collar crime cases, which are mostly embezzlement or elder fraud cases lately. We have public corruption cases that I think people know about. Intellectual property theft, computer hacking. We have terrorism cases, which here are usually support of terrorists overseas financially. We have an awful lot of human trafficking and child exploitation cases, hate crimes, civil rights violations, and then the firearms and the drug cases. So we're doing everything, but you're right. When you do more of the violent crime prosecution, something has to give. And what has to give is we have fewer prosecutors doing the other kinds of cases, but they're just doing more with less. They're working so hard, they're so talented that the number of prosecutions in all those other areas are up, as well as violent crime prosecutions.
Really? The
Yes.
numbers are up even with everything else you guys have chosen to take on?
Correct, and it's just the talent of the prosecutors there.
Have you had to stop bringing, say, more complex cases that might take more time and sort of focus on knowing you can get this guy, so let's go for him?
No, we really haven't. I mean, we're doing every case that comes in that should be a federal case. We're not declining any, and we're doing them quickly, especially in the violent crime cases. I think there's a need to get people off the street. Once someone becomes an active shooter, that usually continues until they're locked up, so we try to get them as quickly as possible.
Do you have any sense of how fast you're able to move cases in the system versus, say, the circuit court system? I've heard you guys are just so much faster.
We are fast. I'm not as familiar with their system, but we try to indict cases within the first month if we can, if we have all the evidence. If not, we start pushing hard on those cases to get all the evidence.
And once you're in that first month, how long generally does it take somebody to get to the point of being sentenced?
Usually it's about 6 months or so throughout the process.
So that does seem relatively swift.
Right, and it depends on whether they plead guilty or not. And frankly, most of the people end up being detained after they're arrested, so they're off the street for that whole period of time.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit more about that whole violent crime focus. The circuit attorney in St. Louis, Kim Gardner, she's had some major staff turnover. She's also taken a break or a step back from prosecuting some kind of offenses like some drug crimes. Have the feds in some part been stepping in to fill that void of what her office is not doing or doesn't want to do?
Really, we coordinate with her office and with the county prosecutor's office on at least a daily basis. We go through every case, and prosecutors in her office and my office decide which ones should be prosecuted federally and which ones should not. If there's no federal crime involved, then we don't have a choice. We can't prosecute those cases. But as far as the categories of cases, I mean, my view is that prosecutors have discretion on a case-by-case basis, but I don't feel as though I have the discretion to not prosecute an entire category of cases.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever a point where you find yourself in sort of a fundamental disagreement with Gardner's office? They think they should take a case. You guys think you should take a case?
Oh, I for the 30 years or so I've been involved in this system from one vantage point or another. Those conversations are common. I think we've had fewer of them in the last couple of years than historical. So it is a collaborative effort. Of course, every now and then there'll be a disagreement.
We're talking to U.S. Attorney Jeff Jensen, who's the top federal law enforcement officer here in the Eastern District of Missouri. The St. Louis police have been really harshly critical of Gardner and vice versa. You spoke a little bit about your working relationship with her office. It sounds like that's pretty solid. What about your relationship with them?
I have nothing but the greatest respect for the police officers in the city and the county and the leaders of those offices. John Hayden, Commissioner's just a terrific guy, fantastic leader. Same with Judge Edwards, same with Chief Belmar. I work closely with them. I have the greatest respect for them and all those officers. And they're doing really dangerous work, and they're out there with the federal agents on a day-to-day basis, whether it's ATF, FBI, DEA, Secret Service, ICE, or the postal inspectors. It's just a constant collaboration, and I'm honored to work with them.
And yet you're prosecuting the officers who are accused of beating one of their own when he was there undercover. And, as he told a friend, they beat him as if he was, quote, like Rodney King. This was a pretty severe thing. And they were sort of openly texting their colleagues about this. Like, yeah, let's go beat some of these protesters. Does a situation like that kind of shake your faith a little bit in the St. Louis police?
Well, I can't talk about any ongoing cases, so that's an ongoing matter. I can't talk about that specifically. In general, we prosecute police just like we would prosecute anybody else. If there's evidence of a federal crime, we prosecute them. That's all there is to it.
People have questioned why the only officers charged for beating protesters are the officers who beat this undercover cop. They weren't looking for a colleague to go get. They were just looking for a protester to get. Will we possibly see more prosecutions that come out of what happened on the night of that kettle or other nights where there was police and protester people going head to head?
Well, I mean, we prosecute the cases when we have evidence. So the fact that the victim in that case happened to be an undercover police officer doesn't impact the decision as to whether or not we prosecuted. If we had evidence of other civil rights violations that we could prove in court, we'd be prosecuting those as well. But we need people to come forward and tell us about things that happened, and we need evidence to support what they said. So if we have it, we go forward. If not, not.
Have you been paying attention to some of the stuff that's come out in civil court where the ACLU was making a case that they thought the cops were out of line and the judge in that case did agree? Is that something that you guys have been monitoring? Or
we just monitor for looking for federal crimes if they were committed. That's really our role. And honestly, we have probably 1,000 cases pending at any one time, and that's plenty to
You guys handle a lot.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a new law recently passed in the city to notify police if a buyer of a gun fails a background check. And I know sometimes the concern is that there's all these laws on the books, things don't end up getting enforced. Do you think that's going to be an effective tool to keeping gun violence under control?
Well, I think anything that helps us track illegal gun sales is good. However, we already get information from the ATF about people that as I said, lie and try cases where people attempt to get a firearm even though they're a convicted felon, or they get one. So we get that information and we prosecute those cases. I think we'll probably increase those prosecutions in the near future.
Okay. But so that's already something that you have the tools to handle.
We have those tools, correct.
Okay. So I feel like every time I look at what your office is doing, there is case after case where you guys are getting felons in possession and you are going after these guys that are doing armed robberies and all sorts of stuff. And yet for all those efforts, it has been a really bloody year in St. Louis. And we've got the circuit attorney out there working. We've got you guys putting all this additional manpower into it. Has it been frustrating to see that the crime rate in this city, it just doesn't seem to be dropping?
Very much so. It's extremely frustrating. I think if we were not aggressively prosecuting as we are, the crime rate would probably be worse.
Even higher.
Right, but we're obviously a short-term solution. The long-term solution comes from the groups we work with on a regular basis. The Urban League, Save Our Sons program, for example, getting people jobs in the city, and in particular in the Chiefs Rectangle, Better Family Life, doing their de-escalations, father support, reconnecting fathers with their families. Demetrius Johnson Foundation does quite a bit of job training and helping youth out. So those groups are really the long-term solution. We are a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm. Now, the city recently put a lot of eggs in one basket with this Cure Violence program. Do you have hopes that that's going to end up leading to some long-term change? Do you think they picked the right basket?
I certainly have hopes. I'm in favor of anything that any efforts to try to reduce the violent crime are good. Mm-hmm. I think their Better Family Life does very similar work here already, so hopefully they're going to be working together. I think that's the thought process currently. But I'm in favor of anything that might help reduce the crime rate.
Okay. Well, there's some very serious issues your office is dealing with, and it sounds like you guys are on it. So
we're trying. We're doing the best we can. But again, it's not me. It's the prosecutors that work there that are so talented. My job is to set the priorities and then just get out of their way and let them do their jobs.
Jeff Jensen, U.S. Attorney for Missouri's Eastern District, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah.
And good luck with those ongoing efforts.
Thanks.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.